You are tuned to your better music station, 222, transmitting 24 hours a day. You are tuned to your better music station, 222, transmitting 24 hours a day. You are tuned to your better music station, 222, transmitting 24 hours a day. You are tuned to your better music station, 222, transmitting 24 hours a day. You are tuned to your better music station. KING presents Melody Hour.
And a very good afternoon to you from John Ross-Barnard. Time indeed to ease the tempo and join the tones of Melody Hour. Quick change review here to Pearly Shoals.
A very good afternoon to you. How nice to see you all here. And the best bit so far I've heard today in Dutch, but I had it translated for me, which was to say if we were offered the job again today, this minute, the one reason it would be because the sex was really great in those days. If it was funny in Dutch, it's hilarious in English. Good afternoon, I'm John Ross-Barnard to moderate this session. Now you will notice that I am the old fart. I am wearing the jacket, the poppy, and so on. I represent the management, the boring bit, the news reading section. On my right and my left is the humour, the entertainment, the guys who've got something interesting to say, and no doubt, looking over my head, it will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, we don't want this to be like a party political conference, so I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to give you 30 seconds, a trailer, a commercial, for which they're very used to doing, for what they're going to say in the 5 or so minutes afterwards when we have the session. And then after that, there'll be some questions and hopefully answers from this side of the table. So if we're all disciplined, we're all ready to go. Ladies and gentlemen, the first trailer of the afternoon, Guy Hamilton.
Hello.
Thank you.
I was Guy Hamilton. I'm now Jerry Zeeler. I started out as Jerry Zeeler, then I became Guy Hamilton, aged 18. And just after my 18th birthday, I went out there and onto Radio Essex, where Roy Bates, our illustrious chief, gave me the name Guy Hamilton. I didn't know he was a film director, but every time he appeared on the BBC, hey, I got £6 later on. From Radio Essex, we became BBMS, and then I went on to a ship off the north of England called Radio 270, which was a lot of fun. And then the rest of my life has been in and out of radio and television now, and a bit of advertising in the middle. But it's great to be here.
I agree. On the right-hand side, at the extreme right, not a political statement, Bill Rollins.
Thank you, John. I always thought I was pretty young when I went out to the Sunkhead Fort radio tower, but I've just discovered I apparently was the youngest one on one of the forts because Paul has just told me he was a month older than me. We've got a few stories to tell. We possibly remember some of the better times, you know, how things were, and we look back. But in reality, you know, was it much fun at the time? Possibly not, with no supply boats, shortage of food. But then it got better in the end. I'll tell you more later.
So that's the right of centre. On the left of centre, we've got John Stewart.
Well, very good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for turning up to see us, amongst other people. I was John Stewart and Chris Stewart due to Union British Actors Equity mix-ups. Anyway, I'll be back soon with stories of basic toilet facilities on King Radio, plus a lack of food and drink on Radio Essex, not to mention the day that the Essex aerial fell into the Thames estuary, putting us off the air for a while. All this and more coming soon.
We've been trying to get it up ever since, haven't we, Dick?
We have. Hi, I'm Dick Dixon, and I'll attempt to, or try and remember how, in fact, I actually got into radio. I was actually going out to the state. I was listening to a record And lo and behold, I was listening to Reg Calvert on, which was then Radio Sutch, and he was advertising he wanted someone to come up and fix the transmitters. And I thought, I've got nothing to do, I'll go out there. And I came back and I had the job. So I will tell you something about early Sutch.
And on my left, Paul Freeman from Radio Essex. No, where is he? He's over there. I'm getting my politics mixed up. There he is.
Well, I ended up as Paul Freeman on Radio Essex, but in fact, I was born Terry Palfrey. Mad about radio, absolutely loved radio from a little kid. Very, very shy, but loved radio. I always wanted to be on Radio City, but I was a bit young and they wouldn't give me a job. So when Radio Essex came on the air, just happened to read about it in the newspaper, I thought, this is my chance. I telephoned Roy Bates. He said, be in Essex at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and the job is yours. I went down there, went out to the fort. They asked me my name and they said, Terry Palfrey, that's no name for a pirate radio DJ. You're Paul Freeman from now on. And that's how I became Paul Freeman. I didn't like it, so when I left the fort, I changed it to Paul Peters. And that's what I've been ever since.
And Greg Bantz changed his name to Roger Scott.
Little did I know that there would be another Roger Scott some years later. And he used to claim that it was his real name, so I couldn't revert to that. But I've reverted to Roger Scott today because that's what I was on Radio Essex. These days, I'm a freelance philosopher and wine taster. But it all started in 1966, in February 66, when I was 17, and with very Spartan conditions on the Knock-John Tower. My first job there was filling diesel cans and getting diesel oil flying into my face because it was a strong wind. Many stories to tell, and I expect between us we'll cover all of them.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is your panel for this afternoon. And we'll start on my left with a man for whom stories come naturally. Truth, honour, virtue, and a bit of Aristotling too. Ladies and gentlemen, which are you going to be called?
I'll be Guy Hamilton today.
Welcome, Guy Hamilton.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I said earlier, it started just after my 18th birthday. I'd skived off the last few months of school. I told my headmaster, hey, I've got this job on an offshore commercial radio station. Didn't say pirate. Went out there, down to Southend, and got on a little boat. And I'm going to tell you some of the fun and frolics we had there, and some of the scary stories too. Dick's going to help me tell you a very true story. But when Martin and Hans said, let's talk about the forgotten forts, I said, who's forgotten them? I've lived with it all my life, and it was a hell of a training for an 18-year-old. We didn't know what to expect. I went out on this boat, and we came alongside we called it the Dolphin, the landing stage of the old anti-aircraft fort in the Thames estuary. It was leaning that way, and it was covered in seaweed, and there was half a ladder on the side, and you had to jump from this boat doing this onto this ladder, make your way up. In my day, it was a plank across the top of this Dolphin. Originally, it had been a rope, I think, all the way, and I think Terry will tell us it was even a hatch in the early days, but we went up this leaning Dolphin, up a plank at that sort of angle, 50 feet above low tide, and then up this ladder and the top. And I just looked at this ladder I had to jump off the boat at, and I said, I want my mum. And from then on, it was great. We were climbing over it like monkeys soon afterwards. Greg had got there first. He claims to be the youngest, so there's going to be a fight here later. But we were all about 18, except the older folk. Oh, he's gone to see. He can't hear me. He can't hear me. We had a lot of fun.
Our engineer was only about, our chief engineer was only about 30, but he was known by the rest of us as the old boy.
That's how young we all were. But it was a fantastic upbringing. As Greg has said, you loaded diesel 1 minute, you cooked the breakfast or did the washing up the next minute. Greg and I were the only people up at 9 a.m. The engineers used to work all night. We'll tell you a good story about that in a minute. So I did a breakfast show. Greg did the 9 o'clock show after a bit. And we worked together. I had to get him out of bed at 5 to 9. Sometimes I succeeded. If I didn't, there was a copy on the wall of a record called I Hate Getting Up in the Morning, Baby. So we put that on instead of Greg if he was late. But I used to say to Greg, how many eggs do you want for your breakfast, Greg? 1 or 2? And he would say,
Well, at least 3, obviously.
We were the only people who ate eggs out there. So most of the rest of these eggs, and it was the only thing there was plenty of on Radio Essex was eggs. So we used to have egg fights during the morning, and for years afterwards, all my clothes had egg stains on them. But that was a lot of fun. We learned how to crank a diesel. We learned how to switch a light on by twisting the wires in your bare hands. I never did understand three-phase electricity. It was at least 3 phases out there. And most of all, I learned how to broadcast. Roy Bates thought my voice was useful, but I didn't know anything about it. And I owe a lot of what I learnt out there, not only to colleagues here, but to a man called John Knight. None of us knows what's happened to John Knight, but he was a man from Kent in southeast England. He was a woodsman. He'd been working in the forests of Kent, and he had a real country accent like this. But
The forests of Kent?
The forests of Kent, you remember that. He chopped them all down. But John Knight he went on air and he changed persona like that. And he had this wonderful, mellifluous voice from deep down here somewhere. And he taught me how to speak proper. So that was a lot of fun. We started, as a new boy, I started at 3 o'clock in the morning as what we later called the graveyard shift. On Essex, it was not the graveyard. It got a lot of mail because it was the only English language station that was on at night. Even the BBC would shut down before midnight. And at 3 o'clock, there were a lot of English truck drivers, bakers especially, who would not only write and we'd play records for, the bakers would send out cakes this big with iced pictures of the forts, usually the wrong sort of forts, because they'd only ever seen the Radio City or the Radio 390 forts. But we were on a Navy fort like this with 2 big legs. You're all experts, you know about this. But these were different. We were the only radio station on this, and that was the studio there, and on the top we had a makeshift aerial. But the point I want to just tell you was at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was pretty spooky out there in the middle of the sea. You could see the lights of Essex and Kent a long way away. One day, I was doing my programme as the new boy when all of a sudden the door burst open.
Being out there, as you were saying, in fact, it was really spooky, especially at night. And being on a very old tower, with the sea moving, you get clanks and all sorts of noises. What's that? No. Well, I was working with Mike, and we were, as Jerry was saying, we were at all sorts of weird hours. Very early in the morning, we were working on the transmitter. We were making another transmitter, or keeping the original one on the air. And lo and behold, we wanted a coffee. So I said, OK. I walked from one end of the fort right the way down the centre to the other end. Beg your pardon, I went into the kitchen first, picked up the kettle. No running water then. I had to go to a carboy in the store. I filled up the kettle, took it back in the kitchen, and plugged it in, and then went back to Mike. And a quarter of an hour later, Mike said, "Where's the coffee?" So I went back, and the kettle had gone. So I thought, as normal there, always playing pranks on each other. Like the fact that pressed the microphone and it didn't work because someone had disconnected the microphone. Always playing pranks, so I thought, obviously, someone's got up and they moved the kettle. So I came back. I said to Mike, "OK, where's the kettle?" He said, "No, I've been with you." I went into the studio.
I was on air.
He was on air.
I didn't know
Everyone
what-
else was asleep down.
The door flew open and there was this ashen-faced Dick standing there. This Dick, not a Dick. This
Can you
Dick.
moderate your language?
This Dick stuck his face in and said, "Have you been out of here?" I said, "No, I'm doing the programme."
He was a new boy, you see.
Sir. And carried on. And what I'd experienced was him in deep shock. We knew no one else was up. They were all snoring away downstairs. You could have heard them coming upstairs.
This is what he tells you now. I still don't believe it. But the whole thing is the fact that I went back, I couldn't find the kettle. I went back into the storeroom and there was the kettle. And I thought, obviously going potty, I haven't put it on. But there was no power in that room and the kettle was still hot. 20 years later, no one will admit actually moving that kettle, and I still don't know what happened.
Wasn't me, Gov. Mike Brereton was the other engineer. He's
And
my
he was-
lifelong
he was-
friend.
yeah.
He swears blind.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was true. He didn't leave the transmitter room. Yeah, it's only the kettle that moved, which is like most engineers at night. It was a lot of fun.
So,
Yeah.
onward and upward.
Ah,
Hollins.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
The mic hasn't come on.
Press the button.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Typical engineer.
Not used to these not used to these modern things.
Nor did I.
Where you switch on microphones. Anyway, as I said earlier, I always wanted to be on the radio, and my chance came when I saw this newspaper article about the wars between Radio City and Radio Essex. Radio City had decided that they were going to take over this other town, Knock John, and I don't quite know what they were going to do on Knock John, but I think
we were going to start another station.
Going to start another
we were going to
station.
sell Radio City to someone and start another station.
Yeah, I
on
think you were
Knock
trying to sell
John.
it to Radio London, weren't you? I think. Possibly not, I don't know. Anyway, so I saw this article in the paper and I thought to myself, right, this is my chance. I'll go down to the telephone box on the corner. We didn't have the phone on in those days. A lot of people didn't have the telephone then. There were very few people with telephones. So I went to the telephone box on the corner. I got directory inquiries to find the telephone number of a guy called Roy Bates who lived in Southend. And I phoned him and I said, I want to come and work on your radio station. And as I said, he said, if you be in Southend nice and early in the morning, the job is yours. And so I went back to Mum and I said, I'm off in the morning. I'm going to work on this pirate radio station down in Southend. And we borrowed a suitcase from the lady across the road because we didn't possess a suitcase in those days. So I packed my little suitcase and travelled to Southend. Roy Bates met me at the station, and before I knew where I was on a little boat. Well, actually, it was the next morning. I was on a little boat from Pagglesham, a little tiny fishing boat that took probably 3 or 4 hours to wind its way through the Essex marshes to start with, and then headed out to sea. We stopped at the Mid-Barrow Lightship, I think it was the Mid-Barrow Lightship, and handed letters over to them. And within another half an hour or so, we were approaching this fort. Now, this fort was enormous. You can't believe how big these things are until you actually go in a little tiny fishing boat and you look up at them. And it was probably 30 feet high, this
No,
tower.
that's the wrong towers.
And when we got there, the fish, mind you, I haven't told you, I was a very, very shy lad in those days. I'm not quite so shy now, but I was very shy. So when I got on this boat, I sat on the front, the bows, with my little suitcase, and the fishermen were in the cabin on the thing, and I just sat there like this with the suitcase, waiting to be taken out to the fort. When we got to the fort, one of the boatmen said to me, well, when we approach the tower, you'll see there's a ladder down the side. When I tell you to jump and grab the end of that ladder. Now, this ladder had been going up and down under the sea for, 20 years then. So the bottom, probably 8 or 10 feet, had rusted away completely. So you had to wait for the swell of the water, the waves, I suppose they are, to take the boat up. And as it got close to the end of this ladder, you grabbed the ladder when you were told to, and you hoisted yourself up. Now, the bottom of this ladder was rusted away completely. So when you got hold of it, it's all wobbling and breaking away in your hands. And I thought,
It only lasted about another month.
oh, did it?
Till the whole thing
don't
fell
tell me
down,
that
yes.
now. I might not be here to tell the story. Anyway, I climbed up that ladder, kept going. It must have been about 30 feet, wasn't it? Must have been about 30 feet. I came through the little hatch at the top, and I was met by a lifelong friend who sadly can't be with us today but would have liked to have been, and that was Richard Palmer, Dick Palmer. And he said, "Hello, I'm Dick Palmer. I'm the fort captain. What is your name?" And I told you earlier, my name is Terry Palfrey. Oh, dear. That doesn't sound like a very hip DJ, does it? So they all sat round in the little room that was the mess room, and it was a mess as well. They called it the mess room, and they sat round and they decided, one of them thought that Terry White would be quite a nice name for me. And then another bright spark came up with the idea, Paul Freeman. Paul Freeman, that's it. Paul Freeman, all right, Paul? So I said, yeah, that's it. OK, you're Paul from now on. And that was how I got my name. Oh, I've only got 1 minute left. We better get moving on. Anyway, I was quickly showing around this wonderful radio station, and the most fascinating part for me was the transmitter. Now, I'd always imagined that transmitters would be in a beautiful cabinet, you know, with all these dials and flashing lights. Not the one on Radio Essex. The one on Radio Essex, from my memory, I may be wrong, was a collection of transformers and valves, and I think they were 609 valves or something. RAC 609?
813s.
Was that? Oh, well, 613.
813s.
813. I can see these valves now. They were about that tall. And it was just a collection of things on the floor with a brown cable coming out, going through a porthole, and then down to the eastern side of the tower, into the end of a big gun. There were big guns on these forts, and that end, the aerial was in a scaffold pole in the end of the gun, up to the top and then down to the other end. I had a fabulous time on Radio Essex. I was only there for a short time. I should never have left, and I'm sorry I did.
It's a shame he did. Thank you very much, Paul. On to Bill Rollins.
Well, again, as a 16-year-old kid that's got a job on the radio, how it came about, I'd heard this station, Tower Radio or Radio Tower, asking for presenters, and asked to take a tape, or was asked to send a tape to an address in Trinity Street in Colchester, Essex. Anyway, I took the tape in, I banged on the door, and you can imagine my complete surprise when the guy who's running the operation, which was Eric Sullivan, is somebody I've known for years. So, and that probably got me in the door more than the demo tape. With the offer of working on the fort for £10 a week. And at the time, I must admit, with a lot of people say people never got paid on radio religiously, 10 quid a week wasn't a lot of money, but we always got the money. Guy was talking about eggs for some... Guy, you were saying earlier on about eggs. You remember eggs on the fort?
Extremely well.
Extremely well. Well, our food, when things got bad, somebody somewhere managed to get hold of, these, you obviously don't have them perhaps in Holland, you're very lucky, Frey Bentos steak pies or steak and kidney pies with puff pastry.
Oh, we ate that as well. That was it. Frey Bentos.
They're in a tin, and you have to cut the tin lid off, put them in the oven. Well, the problem was the oven didn't work. So to prepare the food, it involved taking these pies, cutting them into numerous pieces, adding OXO cubes, which is a stock cube, chopped up onion, adding it to a bloody great saucepan and just stirring it until it was allegedly cooked. So you've got sort of fatty pastry in this congealed mess. And that was our menu for a long...
We had something very similar on Knock John Fort, the Radio Essex Fort. It was crossed between stew and soup, so we called it stoop.
Things, a lot of problems. The Radio Tower never really took off. It was initially it would have been. They probably got recordings of it somewhere of the test transmissions when it was initially done with George Short. Tower radio testing. Then the signal was good. George unfortunately was suffering with some liver trouble or kidney trouble, and in fact died shortly around Christmas. I think it was 1965. We then ended up with another engineer by the name of Derek Masson, who, I think he'd worked at the local TV store, And he really wasn't much good with transmitters, to say the least. I remember Eric Sullivan, the managing director, coming out and saying, get that more gain on that. And he brought the necessary bits, which I can't remember. What does a 52 set use? Do you know?
It's an old army set.
That's an old army set. Is it an 813 or an 807? I can't remember what the valve is.
There were 807s, I think.
807s, I think. And he brought the necessary bits out, and Derek made out that he could get more power out. Well, the fact that all he did was put the heaters on the valve, so it looked as if things were happening, but the signal hadn't improved. With George's loss, that's when our signal started. We lost the signal. People were coming in and putting money in. One wonders where the money was going sometimes. Possibly the best car sticker, and I'm going to stick my neck out now. Is this not the best car sticker? I don't mean the actual print quality, but that is printed on, you see that? Vinyl, and that's 46 years old. So, those days that was worth a lot, probably cost quite a bit of money.
I can't let him get away with that. What about these?
They're paper.
Yeah, but they came in 6 colours.
Oh, well,
all of them red.
No, it was great fun, really, it was good. I mean, there was times where, one quick story, because I know John's probably got his stopwatch on me. There was one particular time where our supply boat couldn't go out, and it was the time when the Cheetah, the Miamigo had gone on the beach at Holland Haven. The Cheetah was taking the place of Caroline, from a ship lent by Radio Sud or Brit Wagner. Radio London was out there, I don't know, I can't remember, and Radio England, I think, at the time. And we managed to cross the palm of the captain, I do hope he's not here today, guy by the name of Casey Romas, who was the captain of the Offshore One, to take us onto the fort. Have we got a picture anywhere of, have we got a picture of a naval fort anywhere? No, that's an army fort.
Wrong fort.
Stand up again.
Oh, right. If you can imagine, thank you, Guy. We borrowed the Offshore One, or got a lift on the Offshore One, and there's the rest of us hidden underneath tarpaulins until we'd done the drops from Harwich on the Cheetah, the Radio London ship, and the Radio England boat. And then we could pop our heads up after it, because the ship was coming back over to IJmuiden, I think, at the time, in Holland. The problem was, we said to the captain, Casey, whatever you do, if you imagine that's the fort, there's a leg there and a leg there, lay there where the tide is pushing you away from the fort. Well, somehow he managed to get one mast there. Wedged. Now, I don't know what the Dutch, fuck me, I'm in a mess is, but what he did was put it into full steam ahead for a landlubber and took the front mast or the back mast straight down, which crashed through the wheelhouse. There it is.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, that's not us, but I don't think that's
that's not
Yeah.
That's not John, yeah.
And managed to break the front mast. Well, of course, he come back to back to Holland and was promptly sacked. There's more to the story. If I get a chance, I'll tell you later.
While that was happening, John Stewart was hanging 1 foot from a piece of rope over the towers at Red Sands, weren't you, John?
You exaggerate, John. You really do. I did that in more recent years, actually, with the BBC film crew and Guy. We visited the Principality of Sealand to inspect the amount of rust on it, but that's another story. But I was left hanging for 20 minutes while the skipper, the boat, tried to line up. He'd never visited the forts before, but a wise move, I think, under the circumstances. No, that wouldn't work. Definitely wouldn't. Anyway, I was 22 years old going back many, many years, and I joined King. I had a 3-hour audition with Mike Raven in London and got the job. I was put onto it by my good friend Mark Sloan, who had joined King Radio 2 weeks and a week's holiday before me. And when he came on shore leave, he said, if you want to get into the business, somebody's just walked off, so phone this number. And I got the job, chucked in work and went out there to find that the mess room when we sat down to lunch, the old wartime distemper paint on the ceilings was flaking. And if you had soup for lunch, the flakes used to fall into it. It was quite picturesque, sort of slow motion fall of this lumps of paint. So we painted it, and I thought, this is not broadcasting, surely. But I must say the toilet facilities were quite amazing. A hole in the floor, and don't use when the tender's underneath. Simple instructions, but straightforward enough. In later times on 390, on King, the 390 mast was being put up, and we were often asked to put an LP on and venture out to the forts, to the various sections of the fort, and help to pull up the aerial sections. As the higher they got, the heavier it got, and the more people they required. So that was quite an exciting thing. Even more exciting, one day I was walking across the catwalk. I think this might venture into 390 time. And I noticed the Channel Airways Islander aircraft skimming along very close to the water. And everybody else other than the person on air was up on the top of the fort sunbathing. So I nipped over onto the roof of that fort and said, look, it looks like an aircraft with a problem. And they said, no. He comes out, it's the engineer from Channel Airways, and he does a little test run, and he always hops up over the catwalk. I said, he might do that over the catwalk before we put the aerial up and the guys down. And to this day, none of us could say if that aircraft went within the triangulation or the outside. And if it had touched that wire, I wouldn't be here for a start, and none of the other people. You're absolutely right. Amazing. The other thing that was quite amusing was whether you smoked or not. Nerves got to you your first day on air. Albeit just playing continuous music and time checks. And invariably, there was a sort of format to this that even non-smokers took. Of each time you completed another stage, you queued up the next record. To sort of calm one's nerves, you'd light a cigarette. But then you have to put it in the ashtray because you've got something else to do. So when you've done that, you'd light another cigarette. And after about half an hour, you'd have a whole ashtray full of smouldering cigarettes. Purely nerves. I think everybody did that, but such is life. Let's see, we'll get there in a minute. Yeah, Harry Putnam was a man who was connected with Radio Essex, an American DJ who joined the station to sell airtime, and there was a wonderful story that he had come out to the fort with Roy Bates, I believe on Roy Bates's boat, and they ran aground on a sandbank on the firing range in that vicinity, and apparently Harry was running up and down what exposed sandbank there was to run up and down on, going, oh my God, we're going to be shot at and sunk and whatever. Lots of fun. The other thing was we had on Essex a visit from Central Television, and the day was absolutely beautiful. The Thames Estuary was like a mill pond. It was like a mirror. There was not one ripple on it. You could just see reflections of the clouds. It was an amazing sight. And the tender came chugging along, and there was all this laughter from the film crew on board, until they saw a rope being lowered over the side. There was absolute silence. These white-faced television people eventually got on board, and I think they just kept on shooting because they didn't want to go off. It didn't really appeal to them. But that was a great programme because it highlighted, it was a 1 hour show, or 55 minutes, whatever advertising allowed for in those days, and it was good old Central Television. They had the first half hour of the show was Swinging Radio England and Britain Radio, being compared to the luxury of Radio Essex. That reason for the rope being lowered was very simple. Looking down, if you could look down on top of the fort, the north leg, I believe it was, that had the dolphin on the end. So here are the two legs like that. So we put them there, that's north. We look down, the dolphin collapse landing stage is there. And on this face here, at about 4 o'clock, there was a steel ladder that was bonded into the concrete of the leg. And it was quite a rough day, and the skipper said he put a line round the ladder and asked me to go on the gear lever for the boat, and I was getting the instructions forward, aft, which I did, and everybody managed to get on board. They get to the top of the ladder, you went through a hatch, and you were safe and sound then. What actually happened was the next command was neutral and run, which got me away from the gear lever, and I got on that ladder and I went up it, and I thought, this ladder is moving out. And it was. And Tom and Jerry cartoons, when something happens like that, their feet sort of go round like that, and it's not a problem because they're still in the cartoon after that event. When you're doing that on the side of this lump of rotting, festering concrete, I just got through the hatch when the whole ladder went. Hence, we then had to have the rope with a noose on the end lowered down, and you make your way up the other bit. Oh, dear.
But you're still here to tell the tale. Ladies and gentlemen, it is nearly 14 minutes past 2, and this is Roger Scott.
You should be on the radio. My recollection of the rope was not the result of being convicted under the Marine, etc. Broadcasting Offences Act, because they couldn't actually hang you, but they could put you away for a little while. But it was being hauled up to the platform on Radio Essex on the end of this rope. I'd never been up on a rope before, and eventually they got a ladder organised. But by the time I got to Radio Essex, February 66, it wasn't going up ladders and through hatches, it was being hauled up on the end of a rope. The music policy of Radio Essex was different from other stations in that we didn't really have much of a format, and in fact we didn't have much in the way of records to play. A few record companies would supply music, notably Polydor. One of our number, David Vincent, who lives in Canada these days, he used to go to Polydor Records and bring back to the fort a load of Bert Camford records. Other artists? Any recollections? No. Well, it was Bert Camford. Radio Bert Camford. That happy feeling and so on. But John mentioned Harry Putnam. He'd been a jock in America. And he helped out with the music because he supplied a lot of rather dodgy American singles from the late 50s and early 60s. And they were interesting. I mean, these days they would probably be collector's items, some of them. But they certainly in Britain and the continent, a lot of them weren't hits or anything, but they were there. And they fell in, lots of them fell roughly into the category of easy listening. A lot of stations down the ages have claimed to be easy listening, and they're probably playing frantic dance music or top 40 or something like that. But Roy Bates, who owned Radio Essex, he wanted an easy listening station. So apart from Bert Camford, we got the likes of Miss Tony Fisher singing songs like The Big Hurt and West of the Wall. You've never heard of them, nor had we, but we played them to death because we didn't have many records. Some of our fans did lie further afield than Essex. We were billed as Britain's first local radio station and Britain's first 24-hour radio station. But we were not only local, and sometimes we were very local, especially at night time with foreign interference on medium wave. We could just about be heard, South End really. Daytime was better. But having said that, because of the characteristics of medium wave, we could be heard very well indeed after the French station on the same frequency had gone off air about midnight. In Scandinavia, we used to get a lot of reception reports from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and other Nordic places like Finland. We were probably overall more known about and more popular in those countries than we were at home. After all, this is billed as the forgotten stations on faults. But I expect a few, if there are any any of you from Nordic countries today, you will definitely remember Radio Essex because of those reception conditions. Getting back to the stickers, Dayglow, we invented Dayglow. There were no high-vis vests in those days, and it was as a result of seeing Roy Bates's car stickers that the high-vis vest was invented. And now, of course, every Tom, Dick and Harry wears one of those, whether it's an emergency or not. And in fact, that's rather distracting because you used to be able to tell there was an emergency because somebody was wearing a high-vis vest. But now, in fact, we were going to issue them to you to wear here today because it is a bit of an emergency listening to us old farts talking about 46 years ago. But if you want to know, a few minutes left. If you want to know any more details about our fabulous record collection, then just ask.
That's a very good point to break for a moment, because to bring a little light as well as shade to our afternoon show, we have a DVD. I love the way the engineers go, "What, me?" when you ask for something like that. So in the middle of this, "What, me?" cue the video.
Shall I describe it?
Yep. Is it off?
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has it got sound?
This one has.
Have you got some sound as well?
This is the Knock John Fort, recreated in CGI by Mark Wesley, who was Mark West out on Radio Essex and now runs his own production company in Essex. The guns were still there and the ammunition lockers when we were working there. Bofors guns on either side. And a searchlight tower which some people thought was for radar at the top, which we cut off. It made a lovely splash. It's still there, but the Dolphin, the landing stage, has gone. We cut the top off. And I think it's beginning to lean, so it's a shadow of its former self. But thanks to Mark Wesley for that. You can cut it there. Thank you very much.
Well done. Those of you who remember Tom Pepper, who was the man who went across the waters to Red Sands and climbed aboard Red Sands to start Invicta Radio, who sadly met his death in drowning when the ship or the boat that took him to shore sank. One of the suggestions was that the boat sank because Tom had stolen so much metal off the boat in order to take it ashore. And in these days, where you've got to be careful where you're walking in case the vials have removed a manhole cover and you disappear just for the metal. Just imagine how much Tom Pepper would be making today. We loved him dearly, so he's up there saying, "Now look, lads, you should have got that generator as well." The generator was amazing. As John will remember, there were, I think, 4 45 kVA generators on board Red Sands forts, and they just cleaned the Ministry of Defence muck off them, the gunge, put the terminals across, and it fired first time. It was quite remarkable.
And then we had the very large Lister generator come out, the brand new one, for the 390 system. That was enormous, and watching that being winched up, you kept on thinking, will the cables take the strain, or was it going to go splash?
There was a small problem for the cook. The cook was standing in his kitchen when they turned on the new RCA 10 kilowatt transmitter, and he picked up, just off the shelf, a saucepan and got a bloody great burn off it from the RF. And he was standing, his eyes were wide like this. We couldn't touch metal. couldn't touch metal at all. It was that terrifying. And they told me at the time, you will lose your hair and you'll never have any children. I plead guilty, allegedly, to losing my hair. My wife will talk to you if you're interested on the question of my 3 children. Any questions from the floor? Sir? Tower TV.
Tower television. The story was that somebody was sitting watching a television set on VHF 405 lines at some time in the morning, some 4:15. On the fort at the time when I first went out there, before George Short left, there was a camera. Now you may have seen. I don't. Unfortunately, we haven't got many pictures of the tower up, sunk head up there. There is a picture of a put-up picture made outside of holding a closed-circuit video camera, which was but no, there was never a transmission from the forts. Just very quickly, and I don't want to cut other people's time off. Telling you the story of the boat and the offshore one. Well, eventually he went to Holland, got sacked. Not content with that, we then bought him a vessel. The captain, we felt sorry for him, so we bought him a boat, and I've seen it listed on various websites. I don't know if it's still around in Holland, called the Margie, Marje, which was pretty good because the idea was he'd pick up a load of drinks and cigarettes while he was in Holland, and he'd take them to the port of Colchester, where one of our offices were, and all this bloody drink would be distributed around the office. Unfortunately, Casey didn't quite understand Colchester. He dropped it off at the fort. We had a whale of a time. And that is honestly true. To this day, when they blew the fort up, there's probably still 10,000 cigarettes and God knows how much whiskey out there.
Martin van der Ven has just shown me a picture with 5 minutes written on it. Now that, so far as we're concerned, is the word of God, since he's the only man qualified here to give it to us. So, ladies and gentlemen, any other questions?
I'd like to ask a question.
Cue the question.
In the audience here, this is billed as the forgotten stations. Does anybody remember Radio Essex, in fact? That's quite astonishing that, obviously John would like to know...
you see, you did have
King?
listeners.
King? Anybody? King, yes. And what was the other station? Tower? Yeah, so...
Probably, Tower's probably remembered through, just hearing those few test transmissions. And incidentally, they blew the fort up, the Royal Engineers blew the fort up. Have very few souvenirs from the fort, but that key is the key that fitted every door on Sunkhead Fort. I was out on the Ruffs Tower back 2 years ago, last year, with Tony there. I didn't take it. I wish I'd have tried it in their doors to see if I could lock it, but that fitted every door on the fort. And I've still got it. What am I going to do with it? A good question.
I'll swap you for one of those.
Talking of anecdotes to do with food fights and things, we've mentioned eggs. What about the spam? There was a notorious food fight. And this is very self-indulgent. It's nothing to do with the music or listeners in Scandinavia or anything. But on one occasion, spam was being hurled and famously ended up in the studio on the turntable, as the show was on air, going round on the turntable. The stylus didn't take to that very well. I don't know what happened, Dick. Did you replace the stylus or have to close down the station?
Continually replacing the styluses.
And the spam. Can I ask a question? John, you were talking about the visit from the television company. Was there any truth in the fact that they brought out lots of wonderful food on that occasion, and then when the television crew left, they took all the lovely food away?
I can't really comment on that.
That's
the
what I was
brain's
told by-
given up on that
yes,
one. I
yeah.
think there might have been some good food did come out.
When Patrick McGowan, who I think you were on board at the
Danger
time.
Man, yeah.
Yes, when they recorded Patrick McGowan's Danger Man presentation, they certainly brought us out all sorts of goodies. And I have to say that one of the impressive things about Patrick McGowan was while he didn't like coming up to the forts hanging on a piece of rope, and he built us a platform to make life an awful lot easier, the boss of Radio 390, to my knowledge, Ted Albury, who used to write the most marvellous books, tremendous books of daring do and so on, never, ever came out to the forts himself. There's a long story there. I would like to... Sorry.
So Patrick McGowan, the man who, on our British television screens every Sunday night, does Danger Man jump from building roof to building roof, chasing the bad guys, hated heights.
He did.
Loathed them. I'm not going up there.
That's right. That's right. Yes. So we come to the finish, and I'd like to finish on a true story and a high note. The true story is that Patrick Hamilton, otherwise known as Mark Sloan, will tell you that an engineer called Jack Dobson dropped dead right in front of him, carrying a battery across the catwalks on Red Sands Fort. I will tell you that it was me who had him drop dead sadly in front of me. It doesn't matter. But the very nice thing was that just 2 years ago, Jack Dobson's granddaughter got hold of me through the Radio Academy because she wanted to know what her grandfather had been like to work with. And we talked for some 2 hours on the telephone. And that's a huge privilege, I think, for the granddaughter of one of the staff to be able to feel that she could ring and get the true facts. Now, let me look ahead, because is Trevor Adams here? Is he outside? Outside. Yeah. Trevor is part of the Red Sands project for the Red Sands forts. And he told me this morning that there is the remotest possibility, but still a possibility, that the film company showing Brad Pitt's new film, when it comes out, will feature Shivering Sands and Red Sands forts. They got some several £1,000s for the rights. They've just cut the budget from £100,000 to something like £10,000. But just imagine, to those who have a real belief in keeping those forts alive, what £100,000 worth of investment would mean. So I think that's really very good news. And I finish with the words of Norman St. John. I said to him, why do you come all the way over from Australia to do this? And he said, John, pirate radio did some wonderful things for me. I'm extremely grateful. I wouldn't have the career that I've had without it. It's putting something back. Gentlemen.